think we decided to start off by giving ourselves separate times in an initial workshop period. And this was probably about 3 months before we started in the studio with everybody. And from that, each of us had some ideas they wanted to play with. Would that be fair?
Yeah, and then sort of we would meet up a lot and have our little meeting room. Summit. And just share those ideas. And we're very generous with each other to sort of allow each one to have the opportunity to sort of develop that idea. And then when it came to work with the dancers, if I had a certain idea that I wanted to work in, these guys gave me the opportunity to try that. And then with their support, they offer feedback and go, yeah, this is working, this is not working, or how do you look at developing that further? So in some ways, it was a really great asset to have someone there working with you to give you that constant feedback and support.
And then at a certain point after that, we just collected together. And Marc was wonderful here because he's very good at that whole side of, we video things that we do in order to show them to the composer, to remember them, to collect what we like. And so he, in a sense, almost made a film, if you like. He just put together, not in the order, but sections of the material of the movement that we liked, or of the movement ideas that we liked, so that we had those to take to our composer.
And we had lots of post-it notes.
Caroline's really good at this. Caroline's a words person and an ideas person.
So there's a post-it with chunks of material that we could then manipulate to put them in different orders. And so then we'd go back into the studio and go, okay, can we try moving from that into that and see what happens? And then review it and think, does it work? And for me, Janet and Marc are so good at crafting and grafting in the studio, whereas I felt like I had much more. I tried to, but not necessarily. I think I tried to take on what's the linear, what's the story through, how do we find a line that goes through. I don't know that I succeeded at that, but I think that was, I kept trying to have that input in terms of what's the big picture, what does the piece look like overall. And as Marc said, we were really generous to each other in terms of let's just try it and see what happens. And that was an incredible thing to kind of just go, okay. But we were all in the studio a lot together. We were never necessarily in the studio on our own. There were always two of us.
Especially as it went on.
And one of the challenges was that Marc and I were also in the piece, but trying to be inside and outside was really challenging. So much of it sat on Janet's shoulders because it was like she was the one that was outside the whole time. And it was difficult for us to find the balance between just having a cameo role because we'd been out of it for so long, but actually needing to be in it more.
So you danced it?
Yeah.
Because we really wanted to have that integration, and Janet really wanted us to bring that with us being in the work as well. So we really had to get back in there and get ourselves in there and sort of make that seamlessly go through the whole piece. And one thing we really wanted to make clear at the beginning is we wanted to have one voice. We didn't want to go in there and then confuse the dancers by having 3 different voices saying 3 different things. So that's why having these meetings that we had all the time was really helpful to sort of us know where we are, together in our own mind, and sort of relay that back to the dancers.
And I'd say what I learned from it is we needed longer.
Yeah.
We did have meltdown moments. It's inevitable in any collaboration. And so in a sense, I suppose what I feel about the work is it's where we got to, given what we tried to do was very, very ambitious in the time that we had to do. And from that perspective, we went, right, okay, this is it. And we were happy and proud with that. In the future, I'd go, let's give ourselves twice as long because we're almost, more things are happening because you've got more different minds.
Is there an opportunity for the future for yourselves to actually come out of it and have someone else replace you two?
Really good question.
One of the questions that came up for us, which was really interesting, because I think you don't get to see it, when I do, was what would happen if one of these guys were injured because the able-bodied dancers, if you like, the non-disabled dancers, just flip in and out and replace each other in roles. And we had this conversation where our dancers say, well, that's fine, I can just use your wheelchair and I can do your role. And then these guys are going, no. This is actually this is part of me. You couldn't do that. You would need to adapt as a non-wheelchair user. And one of the things we want to do as a research is to take one section of the work that has a wheelchair user in it and adapt it for a non-wheelchair user and vice versa. And I think this will be an interesting part of what we contribute to the whole debate about, integration.
I think that's why we need that thing of time. We need things that we weren't able to deal with,
We didn't have the time.
Just the time not to do that. So luckily we haven't been injured.
Yet. I didn't mean that back.
What do you plan on doing to me?
Is there, perhaps through that kind of thing then, have the opportunity to try and engage potential future dancers to train with you guys and be able to do that both ways, so you could have non-disabled dancers having to adapt and how to move in their own way but using your style, and then do it the other way about.
That's what
with
we want
more
to do. Yeah.
Disabled dancers. Yeah?
We want to do it as a research in the spring, and we're working towards a symposium that we're going to have at the Rec in next autumn, where we want to have done this research and share it. So we're trying to allocate times where we can work on this. Yeah. So, but it is fascinating. And the Life and Times of Girl A was devised in collaboration with our dancers. It has if you like, it has a leading role for Girl A, and Girl A is Selene. She's a French actress, performer with the company, dancer with the company. Is cast as a woman, as a young film director this is probably her first film, and she's, in a way, I feel as though she's pitching to the audience, describing the work that she wants to make. And it's a layered work. It deconstructs a narrative. It offers you parts of a narrative that move backwards and forwards in time. So it leaves space for your own imagination to fill in the gaps. And it deals with his very own issues about, I wanted actors, but I wanted dancers. And what could it be? What happens if you pick apart the barriers between these different art forms? And of course, it's also, she's wanting to make a film. So he uses video in the work and projection of close-ups. And he's kind of playing between forms and between media. And so the dancers get to act. They also get to dance. And they get to film each other, which gets projected. I feel as though it is a really fascinating and groundbreaking piece of work. And we would be very curious. We'd give you feedback forms in your programs. We'd be curious to have your feedback about it, because one of the things that he's asking is, what is dance? What is performance? What's interesting to look at? And I'm very interested in directing Scottish Dance Theatre and thinking about what can it be? What can our art form be? How broadly can we reach? Where is art going anyway? Funding often blocks you in certain ways, but often it needs to catch up with art and the developments in art and where they're going. Are there any more things that I could perhaps offer at this stage, or shall I just see if that triggers any questions or curiosities for you? Is there anything you want to ask about that?
General questions.
It is. Where is it going? Where is it all going?
It's dying.
We feel it's very much living, and we feel as though it feels to us as though we have a curiosity about what can the future be, and about where we're all going, and about how to speak to today as well. Because sometimes it's possible to get left behind where we need to be looking. I'll tell you a bit about our dancers, because we have 1.5 Scots in the company at the moment. And you'll hear one of them speak tonight, Naomi, who comes on at the end of this first piece, and she has a little monologue with perhaps an imaginary person or somebody who's there that she's trying to ask to be interested in her and maybe go on a date with her. And she started her studies, just to give you an idea, at the Dance School of Scotland. And then she that goes to a certain age level, and she then wanted to do more, and she went down to London, to the London Studio Centre, And it was there that I met her while I was working with this company and enticed her back up to Scotland. But there is an issue around where we are in the developing of dance training in Scotland. It's come very late. There are some exciting developments with the Scottish Ballet at the RSASD that they're developing, and they've developed a kind of feeder course that can lead people through into that course. Interestingly, a lot of those dancers are coming from abroad, and there's this question about how we find our talent in Scotland, where I think that Scotland is a dancing nation. If you think about, all the caning we do, and all the music and the great dance music we have in Scotland, and then how people can find their way into training and get the training that they need to go on into professional level. And so our dancers are coming through often trainings either in England or in other countries, France, Spain, Belgium, Holland, yeah. So there's a mixture of accents and nationalities on stage. But what we do every year is we have we're really committed to that idea of feeding into the next generation of dancers, and we have 2 apprentices in the company who do not yet have professional contracts. They're both in the first piece of work, so you might try and spot them. Ellen and Audrey, they both come from other countries to this country, but they've been studying dance in England, and they've now come up to Scotland to kind of continue their development. So you can see we're on a trajectory towards more Scottish dancers. So tell anybody you know that it feels as though there's a need.
Yeah. So I trained as a professional dancer. I started dancing when I was 8 back in Australia, doing jazz dance, ballet, and then went away to an arts college school and studied dance, half a day dance and half a day academic studies. And then got my high school certificate, and then went on to the Australian Ballet School, where I did 3 years at the Australian Ballet School, and was working with the Australian Ballet Company, and then working internationally, and then in South Africa, where I was involved in a car accident, and then became paralysed, and then had to reevaluate what dance meant to me, and realised actually I can't keep dancing, even though this stereotype of what a dancer is didn't fit into my world at that point. I really had to change my own perception and preconceived ideas of what a dancer was. So I found a new pathway to continue that career. Okay.
My background was I did a Bachelor of Arts in Performing Arts that I went into originally because I studied drama and music at school. But the third element that I had to do when I went to university was dance. And I really didn't like it at all, hated it. I had a teacher who didn't quite know what to do with me, so would kind of just say, you just sit over there and do your own thing. I didn't realise at the time just how early I was being introduced to choreography, but I should be very grateful to her. But in 1996, Kenduko were coming to Australia for the first time. Kenduko are the pioneering integrated company based in London, and they kind of have changed the world in terms of inclusive dance in the world. So Kenduko were coming, and an arts organisation based in Melbourne, where I was living, brought together a group of disabled people that had some performance experience. They didn't just want anyone, they wanted people with some performance experience. So I was one of 12 disabled people that were brought together, and we were taught contact improvisation. So movement that we made up on the spot, but in contact with someone else. And I, for the first time in my life, and I was 26 at the time, first discovered what my body could do rather than doing what I'd been told it couldn't do. And I felt like I'd finally landed in my skin, and every week we had a class, and it was like someone gave me the biggest box of chocolates and said, you don't have to share them with anyone, they're just for you. So it was a huge indulgence, and I was completely addicted and dreamed of doing it as a job, and so now I do. So I finally got there.
Well, I've just been given the nod that we need to stop at this point because they'd like us to clear the auditorium and then come back. Is that right? Yes. So thank you very much, everybody, and we hope you enjoyed the show.